projects. I mean, you know, we weren't consulted on any of this, and numbers were set, and we weren't asked why ours were set at a certain level. And you know, we've got a lot of large expenses that like transformers and stuff that are wire, that kind of stuff that's going to actually relays. I mean, that's not what the water department and the Parks and Rec department have to deal with on a daily basis, where we do. So I guess that's the uphill battle that we're going to have with getting these approvals done. So.
Well, the only advantage I see for this uniform purchasing policy is that it's uniform. But from what I can gather, this is just cons for the electric department. Potential delays, potential more work for you. I mean, you got to come to 2 meetings. I know you're saying you don't mind it, but you didn't have to do it before. And the concern that I really have is we're looped in as to what's going on. There's a reason that there's a board that is providing this guidance at this level. If expenses are shoved over here, these people don't have that information. I mean, they're going to get, hey, what's this for and why is that, so on. I think that's whatever questions they want from you, which if they want even more details, it's just going to drag out that process even longer. But we're over here providing this guidance, which now sounds like is not necessary, or if it is, it ultimately doesn't go anywhere or do anything. And what would happen then if, you know, over here they're looking at this spreadsheet and we're looking at this spreadsheet, and they say, no, we're going to delay that, or no, we're not going to do that, or we say we want to delay that, and they say, no, we're going to do it. Now there's 2 different end games, and there's no resolution process here. You know, there's only one path to get money now, and I don't see any pros to this entire process. I don't see how this was considerate of how the electric will run in the future to figure out how we can do business best for the city.
Well, when it comes to strategies that Randy's talking about, first thing that comes to my mind is increased inventory. You got to get ahead of the curve. And seeing Ryan tonight, I realize I'm the last charter board member, which I recall when we did this, if I remember when we had this policy in place, it was something to do with the price chopper transformer and getting a lead in for that. And that's what prompted this. I guess my recommendation, if there's some continued work on it, I understand probably the council and the administration's intent, that maybe it needs to get broke down into more details with transformers and cabling and wiring, and we need more levels of expense authority for certain criteria than just across the board of everything. And maybe that's something that's worth discussing. So I don't know that anyone would have an issue of making certain that we can order transformers in a timely manner when you got our only grocery store having a problem or what have you, or relaying, getting things resolved quickly, you know. So maybe we've just categorized and aggregated everything too simplistic, and maybe we need to get more detailed on average prices for certain equipment and work on it in greater detail. So if you're asking strategies, that's what comes to my mind.
I think that's a good place to start, and I'd add to that in that, you know, with the focus of economic development on behalf of the council, I mean, let's face it, electricity and water is going to be a fundamental item in each of those scenarios. So if we do have a $30,000 X purchase, and we need to, you know, streamline that process and fast pace it in order to meet the demands of that incoming commercial property or what have you that brings jobs or services to our community. To your point, Lance, we don't want this kind of cookie cutter approach to hold that up. So if we were able to have a line item detail of X goes in this direction, Y goes in that direction, et cetera, and bolster our on-hand inventory, which there's an associated cost with that, I think that's, and Bill, you can speak for yourself, but I think that would be something that would support Bill and his team to be a little more nimble within the new, policy and procedures that we've been given through the ordinance.
Costs are always important, but there's nothing more important than reliability and restoration.
And could you break down into like essential items that we need to maybe purchase, like things that are
High risk.
high risk, they could have a kind of pass through, if you will, or, but the other things that, the upgrades and the kind of, I guess, quote unquote, non-essential things that we're doing, but making the grid more reliable and all that kind of stuff, that could be brought, but, say a $12,000 transformer that we don't have on hand goes down, we need to get it ordered ASAP, we could have maybe something as an essential policy and a non-essential policy, I guess.
I guess I feel more fundamental about it. If you start getting into a list, well, now that's a document in an ordinance or a policy that's going to have to get updated. So now we've got this maintenance issue over time, and as the values change of those pieces of equipment. So I guess I'm thinking, Randy, what you said is great, and I think more for a short to medium term, but the long term to me has got to be that the city council is still supposed to be looking into the BPU. So if electric is going to be operated, it is a different beast than other departments in the city. And in certain ways, we can be uniform across the city, but in certain ways, it is different. And in those differences, we need to handle it differently. And if this case, it still seems to me that this would be a case that would be handled by the board that is more intimate with those details. So ultimately, I think we need to push for the BPU and that the board or this board or the BPU board has that authority, because they can understand why you have to have this or that, or why you don't, or whatever the issues are, and it'd be easier to get any one of us up to speed than it would a city council member or the city admin, and that's not because of anything, on their fault. It's just we're here dealing with it. So I think it's got to be pushed more towards that we do have to be different. I don't see how you effectively and efficiently manage the utility by trying to throw a huge blanket over the whole thing and say, oh, everybody play in the same sandbox.
Well, there's a process that's built into the purchasing policy for emergencies, and the city administrator, as I've read it, has the authority to declare an emergency and move forward with the purchase of Lance mentioned the transformer for price shock, if need be. It's just, I think, at least for right now, in the short term, until a BPU is developed and put in place, we're just going to have to see how this thing works out. And a $25,000 transformer, technically by the purchasing policy, has to be bid.
Well, and I think that's mainly going to affect new construction.
Sure.
If we have an emergency, like you said, there's a clause in there for that. But if we have a new business coming in and that transformer's $15,000, ultimately you can go to the city administrator for approval. But if it's not a transformer that we normally stock, we're going to end up ordering two of them. Because if that transformer goes out, we have to have one to back it up to get it back on. So now we're looking at a $30,000 purchase, and now we're looking at going out for sealed bid on those. So by the time the sealed bid process takes place, it gets on the city council's agenda, gets passed, we get it ordered. You're talking weeks down the line before that stuff can even be here to get that business put in.
Well, and the city council's brought up how during their bid process they found that they only get one or two responses sometimes. And we found that in the past, hence why we had selected vendors that found to be reliable and cost-effective over time, so we eliminated the need for a bid on certain items. Again, that's because that was something that was found through empirical data, but a uniform policy doesn't seem to care.